Hey guys, good evening. Happy Friday. So for those of you who work a normal work week, it's what, TJ? Wow. Sorry, lately I've just been like ruining words. It's actually very frustrating. Give me a sec. Sorry about that. Hey guys, happy Friday. So for those of you who work a normal work week, Monday to Friday, it's TGIF. For those of you like me who work every day, Pinky, it's just another Friday. But I'm really happy to see you guys today. So we are kind of continuing on our World Watercolor Month Friday series where we talk about different aspects of watercolor supplies. And I have selected some of my favorite watercolor paints and favorite papers. They're just off camera to kind of demo for y'all today. Oh, hey Dawn, good evening. So, that is what I plan to do because I really didn't feel like I was able to dive too deeply into anything last week because we were talking about so many things. So this week has been a little bit much for me. I had 2 classes. They both went well, but it does take a toll on me when I am preparing and teaching classes. Sometimes it can exacerbate some of my ADHD. It can also just wear me out. So I'm doing the best I can. I certainly did not expect for as soon as the camera to start, my brain to start shutting down, but I'm sure as we get going, things will kind of even out. Oh, hey Tally, good evening. So it's been about a month since we took a look at that Yin Min Blue that Kabocha sent us. It's been drying in this adorable cast resin palette. And I have heard that Yin Min Blue, some people have trouble getting it to reactivate after it's been drying for a month. So I am ready to get started with that and go ahead and test that out first thing. So with any watercolors, and I am going to try to move the camera closer for you guys, so just give me a second, because it's super tiny for y'all. Okay. Hopefully that helps. So it's the teeniest little sample of Yin Min Blue. And if you're not familiar with Yin Min Blue, it's the first new blue in over 200 years. It was discovered in a lab application, and it has some pretty incredible light fastness and heat reflection properties that make it interesting for industrial use as well. So I'm just adding a little bit of water to it, letting it kind of soak in. I'm hoping that Dr. Pepper will cure the brain. I wish something would cure the brain. I'm also going to grab, I just need a sample of watercolor paper. It doesn't even have to be something I love, although we are going to talk about some of the papers I love a little bit later on. I might want to enable autofocus. The problem with autofocus though is it starts jittering the camera a whole lot. I'm hoping it refocused. If it looks out of focus to you guys though, I'll take a moment and refocus the camera. Oh yeah, it does definitely look out of focus. So let me fix that for y'all. Okay, hopefully that's better. So this particular sample of Yin Min Blue is from Core's Custom Color Lab, and Kabocha was able to order 2 tubes, and it looks like so far not having any issues reactivating it. I know other artists on other channels, I've been told, have had problems with getting it to reactivate. So if you guys are familiar with the circumstances of the issues they were having, that might give us some more info. But I also haven't tried painting with it since I allowed it to set up in the palette, so maybe that's it. Maybe it can only take so much reactivation before it permanently hardens. So unfortunately, the camera is not going to show just how nice the color is, because this is a weird one. This color doesn't really show up very well on camera. So it's a shame that you guys can't see it, but I do have a large watercolor illustration that I plan on recording. Let me show you guys. It's a work in progress. It has been so super rainy here that although it's World Watercolor Month, I haven't been able to do any real painting because it's just been too wet for that to be feasible. So this might be, and I'm going to refocus it again. This might be a little bit difficult to see. It's probably because it's pencils and the light is very harsh. I'll adjust the exposure just for a minute so you guys can see. So I have this Madonna and child inspired illustration for my Yin Min Blue test because historically lapis lazuli was such a rare pigment that it was mostly reserved for religious paintings and mainly reserved for paintings of the Madonna with child. So that's why you'll see Mary wearing a lot of blue. Is ultramarine blue was considered so precious that it was only used in that particular context. And what I thought was interesting is Yin Min Blue comes from yttrium, which is also a rare earth element. It also has the scarcity. So I thought it would be a neat homage to art history to use Yin Min Blue in this illustration of a mother with her children, just kind of as like a callback to that. This is not intended to be religious at all. It's just more of a reference to that art history. Hey Hema, good evening. I can just leave on autofocus. Oh, that's what you said. Sorry. Yeah, it's been a, actually I might just leave the camera at this exposure. So that's something I would like to start working on soon, but it's been so rainy that it's just not feasible. I know the paints would not set up very well. No, sorry. I honestly should probably move the stream to earlier in the evening, but people have told me that later works better than for them. Oh, I know what I forgot to do today. I forgot to take something important. That would be part of it. All right, so I want to talk about some of my favorite paints and papers with you guys today. I'm mostly going to be focusing on professional grade paints, but there's a couple of student grade paints that I've reviewed recently that I like, that I'll be able to recommend, that are going to be much more affordable if you're looking for something that, you know, performs well and isn't super expensive. And most of the papers I'm going to be talking about today are going to be cotton rag papers, but I will pull out one of my old standard cellulose papers as well, just for comparison. So I'm not planning on swatching all the paints on all the papers, but we'll see what we can do. So I'm going to start with kind of an old standard on the channel. So Stonehenge, you guys have seen me use Aqua Stonehenge pretty frequently. I use it for most of the field tests for watercolors. So this is a cotton rag paper. It doesn't have a whole lot of sizing in or on it, so when it gets really wet, it can be kind of pulpy. It's pretty easy to find. You can find it at lots of different stores. I think even Michael's carries it, and it's not super expensive for a cotton rag paper, which is one of the reasons I like it. It makes it easy to recommend it. So last week, I refilled my Da Vinci palette and talked about Instagram with you guys. I'm giving my paints a spritz with some clean water. That allows the pigments to soak up that water. It makes the pigments kind of scrape. Wow, that's not what I want. It's called activating your half pans or activating your pans. And basically it just loosens up your pigments. It loosens up that dried gum arabic, and it makes the pigment more accessible to your brush. And while I'm giving that a chance to soak in, I'll go ahead and spray and talk about some of my other palettes. So this is the Core Travel palette. It's getting to the point where I need to refill this one as well. Even though these pans are super small, I paint with this palette all the time and there's still paint left in it. So although it's more expensive, a little goes a long way when it comes to professional grade watercolor paints. And then over here we have my own 2 custom palettes. So this is my dirty looking Daily Driver palette. It is a combination of all the different brands, all the different colors that I like to use. I heard there's a new art palette challenge going on. I think Safira Liu announced it. I only kind of caught it in thumbnails. So Joseph, would you mind filling me in since you're on a different computer and it's a little bit more accessible? But it seems like it might be if you work with a limited palette to work with more colors, and if you work with a lot of colors to work with a limited palette. I don't know where I would fall in because I do both. It kind of just depends on the needs of the project. And speaking of custom palettes, this is where I shove all of my neons, all of my strange granulation like Schmalls blue, which is made from granulated glass, all of my pastels. So this palette has a lot of those Holbein pastel colors in it. Well, I am happy to give you some suggestions, Hema. I've also got, these are my PWC watercolors. So PWC is made by Shinhan. It's a Korean brand. I really like these because right now you can find them for a very affordable price. And I think they're pretty comparable to Holbein's watercolors. Running out of space. I said something about filling me in, but didn't give any context. I think Safira Liu announced a new watercolor challenge based on a limited palette. You'd read it as a thumbnail to me earlier today, but I was kind of having a bad afternoon and I really wasn't in the mood for it. So these are Paul Rubens watercolors. They've been dried in this airtight palette. It's about time for me to refill some of these colors, so maybe I'll go ahead and do that for you guys. So this is what the set looks like. It came with this pink palette and it also came with a bunch, like 24 tubens. And I think the whole set is something like $50 on Amazon. So for professional grade watercolors, you get a lot of watercolor and they perform quite well. Sorry, I'm just trying to like backtrack how I'd fill this palette. So the point isn't to just absolutely fill these all the way. It's to kind of do a squirt like that. And it does do a pretty good job of keeping the colors fairly moist. Although if you go long periods of time in between using it, they do dry out a bit. I think this over here is an area for a sponge. But it didn't come with one, and there weren't any instructions about like using a sponge there, so I've been pretty happy with it though. Rather than, you know, using it while it's still wet, I don't really have a problem with it drying out, and then I just spray some water on it like you guys saw me do earlier. And let let me know what you guys think of the music. We recently got a couple of new Humble Bundle music packs. So should help mix things up a bit. And what's nice about that is they're meant to be used in their license. There's permission to use them for live streaming on YouTube, and you don't have to give credit when you're using them. So that makes them really nice for live streams where I'm not sure what songs are gonna come up in the rotation or in what order. Oh dear. Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm trying to pay close attention to the order that they're in. Something about a coolers palette challenge. Oh, using cooler. That's kind of what I thought. And that's why I was kind of like, yeah, you know, that's not necessarily. I might do that with markers, but especially because coolers actually tells you what Prismacolor marker analogs and what Copic marker analogs are. So like what the Prismacolor name and color number would be, and what the Copic color name and number would be for the colors it picks. So it doesn't just provide hex codes, it also provides Prismacolor and Copic information. So I think that could be fun with alcohol markers, especially because it's a bit more immediate. I'm also going to just give it a quick spritz. I don't want to like totally saturate it since I did just refill it. Running out of room. I'm not going to pre-activate my student grade watercolors just yet, partially because we are running out of room, but it does also give me a nice chance to kind of introduce what we're using tonight. And then these are Roman Schmalls Aquarius watercolors, and I need a palette to put them in. So they're a little bit, I've been buying them open stocks. They're a little bit unwieldy right now. And what's neat about these is you can get these on Jackson's Art, and they're like $3 to maybe $6 for a whole pan. So you get a lot of paint for your money. And the test set, so this set here has 5 colors, and I think it's like $25, which is a pretty good deal for your money. So if you're just getting into watercolor, or you want to buy some nicer, more professional watercolors, that could be a good way to get started. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started by swatching the, I have no room. Ooh. I'm going to get started by swatching the Da Vinci watercolors. So what I'm looking for with watercolors is I want something that's going to activate quickly. So that means after I've spritzed it with water and let the water soak in, I can pick up a lot of saturated color very quickly. One of the misconceptions about watercolor is that it's a very sort of pastel medium, when really watercolor can deliver a lot of color. It's just how you use it. So other artists may choose to add a lot of water to their watercolor in order to get those kind of pastel blends. Generally, I don't want paints that kind of glob up on my brush, because that tells me there's a lot of additives that have been included to kind of stretch it out, because pigment is expensive. I don't know if you guys have ever looked up loose pigment or bottles of pigment online before. I've purchased some for a handmade watercolor project that I want to work on, and it's really pretty pricey. So companies will include either cheaper versions of the same palette pigments, or they'll use cheaper combinations of pigments as a dupe for more expensive ones. And that's not always the worst thing. Like when you see the word hue on watercolors, like typically with like cobalt whatever hue or cadmium hue, that's a cheaper but also less toxic variation that doesn't include like cadmium and cobalt are both, I think, carcinogenic. So when you see like cadmium hue, there is no cadmium included. It's a color very similar to that, meant to be a dupe of that color. So it's cheaper for the company, maybe because they don't have to deal with toxic waste disposal, but it's also not necessarily going to be as toxic for you, the consumer. I think Winsor & Newton has an entire line of like cadmium dupes to help phase that out. So there's some talk about whether or not painting with cadmiums and cobalts and other paints that are known carcinogens, whether or not that actually does have health detriments. And I think unless you're drinking the water, for you personally handling it, probably not, unless you're painting it all over your skin. But you also have to consider, we often dump our waste paint water down the sink. And when these things are being mined and being manufactured, there's a lot of waste in that as well. So, you know, trying to go cadmium and cobalt free isn't just about saving your own health. It's also about saving the environment and the health of those around you, you know, because if you're dumping your paint down the toilet or down the sink, it's going into the municipal water, like sewage supply, and often that gets treated, and then, you know, water is kind of a closed system. So I also want to point out that me personally, when sets include a white, I never use the white in these sets. If I want to add white or make a pastel, I use white gouache instead of the titanium white that's typically included in watercolor sets. In fact, I wish sets wouldn't include white. Oh, doggone it. Excuse me. One of the palettes fell off the desk. I really don't have enough room for all this right now. Someday. Oh, Bowie was trying to eat leftover mac and cheese. So what I like about Stonehenge is it's a cotton rag watercolor paper. It can take a lot of water. It can take a lot of working. It's fairly inexpensive. I can do a lot of layers on it. And it's easy for me to buy more pads of it as I run out. It's not necessarily my favorite watercolor paper to paint on ever, but it's one that I like recommending because, again, it's inexpensive, it's easy to find, you don't have to jump through hoops or order it from a specialist to get it. Well, I feel like, at least in the US, when we're mining for toxic things, we just make it another country's problem. And then we throw up our hands and we're like, oh, well, we didn't know. So by aiming for things that are like cadmium free or a synthetic dupe that isn't as toxic, we're at least taking a little bit more responsibility for that and not contributing as much to the problem. So I probably need to go change out my rinse water because it's getting pretty muddy and that's going to affect how these swatches actually look. But I'm also looking for, I don't want colors that granulate so much that they would make faces look gritty, but I also don't want zero granulation because granulation adds interest. It can make something look like, I'm not a big fan of the Derwent half pans, and if you guys want, I can swatch those and show you guys what I'm talking about, because those use ground up India ink and they're all the same granulation and they just feel kind of flat and boring to me. So when I'm buying paints, I'm looking for some granulation but not too much granulation. I don't know what's wrong with me lately. I feel like I'm having trouble breathing. I was teaching a how to draw faces class on Tuesday, and I had to wear a mask, and I just felt like I couldn't breathe the whole 2 hours. So generally with pre-assembled palettes, you're going to start seeing the same colors over and over again. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, that they're just kind of entry palettes to get you started. So this is the delineation between the Da Vinci palette and the core palette. So you're going to see a lot of like burnt sienna. You're going to see a lot of, well, this one has Da Vinci yellow, which is kind of a warmer yellow, whereas this one, core listed on the bottom and upside down, check. Oh, it's getting all over my hands now. Check plus. That would be cadmium yellow primrose. Yeah, I don't know if it is allergies or my asthma or what, but I mention it because I'm feeling out of breath again now. Sit up straight and take some deeper breaths, and maybe that'll help. Oh, you know what? I didn't even remember to promote this, so give me a sec. Hit me up with your best questions, and I will start sharing this out to social media. I should have done that at the start. This is what happens on the days I forget to take my Ritalin. Just, it's also been kind of a bad depression day, so, you know, just trying to do my best and just not having the spoons for it. Thank you, Joseph. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Dawn. I'm sorry that your tummy's been bothering you. Sometimes I can't tell if it's anxiety or asthma. All right, let me get my head in the game. So some common colors you'll see with professional grade watercolor sets, especially the larger sets like the 12 and 24 color sets, is generally you're going to have two yellows. You're going to have a cooler yellow that's useful for mixing greens. You're going to have a warmer yellow that might be more useful for mixing oranges. You're going to generally have a cooler red, and you're going to have a warmer red. So a cooler red would be something that's closer to purple or maybe magenta, and a warmer red is going to be something that's closer to like orange or scarlet. So I think of it like fire. Fire tends to have like a really warm, hot red in it. So I think of it as, you know, that's the hotter color. But when it comes, so the warmer and cooler thing when it comes to reds always confuses me a little bit. So I have to, you know, try to find ways to remember that. This set here has an orange, a warm, well, it's alizarin crimson, which is really kind of a pink, like a cooler red, and then magenta, which is definitely a pink, but you can mix a true red by mixing this orange with alizarin crimson, whereas the Da Vinci set has kind of a true, like a fire engine red, and then it has like a almost a much darker, almost purple like alizarin crimson, and then it has permanent rose, which is closer to like a magenta. You're also generally going to have a cooler blue and a warmer blue. So like this kind of color here, ultramarine blue, that would be your warmer blue. Phthalo blue, which is this color here, would be your cooler blue. Warmer blues are useful for mixing up purples. Cooler blues are useful for mixing up like leaves and other like bright green sort of things. And I'm generalizing here because there's going to be instances where you might want an olive green, and that's when you would mix a warmer yellow with a warmer blue. So playing around, mixing things, trying different things, that's going to teach you what color combinations are possible. You're also typically going to have a sap green, so that's kind of a warmer green in the set. And I think they include sap green because, you know, fresh spring-like greens are just so easy to mix with a yellow and a blue. Generally, you would have yellow ochre. This particular set doesn't include a yellow ochre. Instead, it has a dark purple. That is one of the other things. So this sort of like grape-esque purple, you can't really mix that from two colors. You can pretty much just buy it. That's dioxine purple. So that's a pretty common color to include in watercolor sets as well, but it's not always included. Generally, you'll have burnt sienna included as well, and then a darker brown. Sometimes it might be sepia, sometimes it's burnt umber, and then sometimes they'll include a white. I'm really not a fan of when they include white and black, but sometimes they'll include a pre-mixed Payne's gray. So you see that gray at the top of the palette there, and I actually do prefer when they include Payne's gray rather than black, because you can kind of create your own black by mixing your burnt umber or your darker brown with your Payne's gray. So that's, you know, those are pretty common colors in any, you know, intro to watercolor 12 color set. This is Rubens Schmalls' test set. So it's just like some of the colors that they think work well or that they want to showcase. And buying test packs or sample packs can be a great way to affordably start with professional grade watercolors. I think Sennelier also has a test pack, and M. Grams has a test pack as well. And that's just like 5 or 6 colors that they think you might enjoy. Daniel Smith also has the Essential 6 color set. So that's kind of just like the quintessential of 2 yellows, 2 blues, and 2 reds. And theoretically, yes, you can mix almost any color you would want from those combinations, but I find that when I'm working with just a limited palette like that and I'm trying to paint something larger, like that's wonderful for plein air, on the go watercolor sketches. But if I'm trying to paint like a portrait, or if I'm trying to paint an illustration, 6 colors becomes really very limiting because you're spending a lot of time mixing colors. And then over here, these are all just the Rubens Schmalls that I purchased open stock because I found that I actually really like them. So I'll just do a little swatch on the side. And you guys can see how wet it is because there's a lot of just standing water. And this is a cotton rag watercolor paper, so really it should be either soaking in or evaporating out. Like, we shouldn't have this much puddling, but it has just been so humid for the past few weeks. Our backyard is basically starting to look like a swamp, and that's why I haven't been able to do a whole lot of painting myself, because it's just so wet. It's to the point where I know anything I put down on paper is basically going to come right back up. I don't know why these are being funny. I activated them and they're just not giving me a lot of color right now. Oh, hey Dawn, good evening. I'm glad you can make it. A 12-hour shift. Oh man, that's rough. You must be dead on your feet. Joseph asked if I have a preferred palette layout. Man, I feel I do. So with my, usually I'll also rearrange palettes to reflect that. So with my Daily Driver palette, I like to think kind of chromatically radiating out. And that allows me to kind of have like, this one's a little bit, these two should be switched, honestly, because all my cool yellows should be up here and my warmer yellows and oranges should be down here. And then that kind of turns into the reds and browns. And going this way, it kind of turns into the blues and the blue greens and the darker blues. Oh, hey Liz, good evening. Like the spacing of the pans on the palette. I don't like anything smaller than half pans, and there are things smaller than half pans. Yeah, let me actually show you guys some palettes I don't like. So the Letter Sparrow palette is a good example because you've got these long, narrow makeup pans, and it's just into the water, of course. It's just really hard for me to get my brush in there. I think she's kind of designed it to be more for brush letterers than for illustrators or comic artists. So I can't really fault her for that, but that's a layout I don't really like. It's very compact, but it's just really hard to navigate it and not pollute all my other colors. And then I'm looking for my Ruby Mountain Paint Company paints, and I'm not seeing them. In my opinion, their layout's even worse because it's got 8 colors instead of 6 crammed in a Altoids tin like this. And it's just really difficult to get my brush in there. And honestly, while I love this for sending samples and receiving samples, if I were to attempt to use this to paint on the regular, I think I would go nuts. So I'm going to go ahead and put this aside because it's going to take forever to dry. That was the Stonehenge Aqua Watercolor paper. It normally does not have dry time issues like that, which is another reason why I like it. But it's just a wet night tonight. So next, I'm going to grab the Paul Rubens block, and I'm going to attempt to make some space on the table while not making a huge mess. We'll see how successful I am. Because I grabbed a bunch of paints that I wanted to show you guys tonight. Yeah, it has to make color sense for me. Like if the top of the palette has black and stuff at it, like if it's like all dark colors at the top and then light colors at the bottom, it takes me a while to kind of reorient my brain around that and get used to it. I would just flip the palette around, you know? So on the Paul Rubens, I would like to try to swatch the PWC for you guys and the Paul Rubens Tubens. And eventually I'd like to swatch. I have a couple of really nice examples of handmade watercolors. There's been a few I haven't liked, but there's also been a couple examples that I really like. So Black Sheep Art Supply. What I really like about these is they are not pretentious. Sometimes handmade watercolors can be very, very pretentious. Sometimes it feels like the people who are making them so other people can own it, not necessarily use it. I feel like Black Sheep Art Supplies, the price is a good price point. I like their mission statement. It's a 2-person company, and they've got a good color range that actually seems like useful colors. So I happen to really like their watercolors. And I also really like Beam watercolors. Now, Beam watercolors are a lot more pricey, but they're also going out and getting a lot of the pigments that they use. And they're making they make the wraps. There's no plastic involved. So while Beam is more expensive, there's a lot more that goes into Beam paints than like with the Black Sheep Art Supplies. You can get these tins on Amazon. You can get the half pans on Amazon. And honestly, that's the same complaint I have for like Letter Sparrow and Ruby Mountain. For me, they're almost as expensive as the Beam paints. You get a lot less paint, and there's just not, in my opinion, quite as much care going into them as, say, with the Beam paints. But that's just my opinion. Like, these are all small businesses, so I'm not looking to slam anybody or take bread off of anybody's table. So I'm going to go change my water, and let's get back to swatching. had to grab my anti-glare glasses because we just switched out the light bulb there and it's causing me a lot of eye strain and headache problems. And I can tell it's also causing strobing when I like time-lapse videos by like 8x. So I need to put some kind of light filter on top of that because it's a lot. Yeah, so pretty much everything I'm going to be talking about tonight is stuff I've done the review for. Now, whether or not it's live yet, it's live on Patreon, most of them. So next, I'm going to do PWC. And it doesn't mean that I don't dislike, or this doesn't mean I dislike brands like Sennelier or Winsor Newton or Holbein. Those all get talked about a lot. I feel like they don't necessarily need any additional advocacy. And I've even talked about them on the channel a lot. So I'm not going to do all of the PWC colors because I've been collecting them. But I'm able to buy them at my local brick and mortar art supply store in Metairie for a really good price. They're like $5 to $10 a tube, and it's a big tube. So that's actually a pretty good price because you can fill a half pan several times from a large, 15 milliliter tube. So for me, if you know you like watercolor, you think you're going to paint a lot, and you want to save money, doing it tube to half pan is, I think, the best way to go about doing it. So I find that these handle very similarly to Holbein watercolors. They're very finely milled. There's not necessarily a lot of granulation. They're quick to activate, and they're just easy paints to paint with. So they're a nice complement for most watercolor palettes. I could try plugging it into the pure sine wave power scrubber. That should stop the strobing. Yeah, I'll try that because it's only really noticeable when I'm time-lapsing videos, but then it's super noticeable and it looks very unprofessional, and it kind of bums me out because like I spend all that time, you know, recording the videos and doing the narration and trying to make everything as nice as possible. Sorry. Only to have my LED lights messing around on me. So one thing I've noticed is that I do not like when Viridian is included in palettes. And I find, it's not that I don't like the color. Like Viridian is almost like this color here. It's like a phthalo blue-green. So it's like a very cool blue-green, like lush jungle foliage kind of blue-green. I like the color. What I don't like is how difficult it is to activate, how I really have to scrub at it. And it just feels like a wasted color for me. So rather than, if you're like putting together your own, you know, starter set, I would avoid Viridian and I would go for like a phthalo blue-green, or just like honestly skip it altogether. I don't find myself using Viridian all that often. Yeah, allergies are being crazy tonight. Oh, and then for some reason I have my cool yellow way over here. But you guys can see these pick up. They're really buttery. You get a lot of color. They blend out very easily. You do get some granulation. So I'm using the Paul Rubens 100% cotton rag watercolor block here. If you want cotton rag paper and you're buying Paul Rubens, you have to make sure that it says that it's 100% cotton rag, because they do have 50% and they have cellulose pads as well. I don't generally recommend or enjoy mixed fiber watercolor pads. I feel like they handle like the worst of both fibers. So I can't, even though they tend to be much cheaper, I can't really recommend them. And I would say just either go cellulose or go cotton rag unless you've used mixed fiber papers and you happen to really like them. Something else I like about PWC is, like I said, they're very similar to Holbein. So a lot of these are Holbein and Kusakabe and Mijello watercolors. Mijello is another one that I really enjoy that doesn't get enough love here in the US. And I would be talking about it tonight, but my Mijello set is packed up. So, but if you do get the chance to try out Mijello watercolors, especially their single pigment watercolors, I highly recommend them because they are great. And Mijello is another Korean watercolor company. So don't be a little bit late, but that's okay. We're just talking about paints. Don't be afraid to try watercolors from other countries because there are some really great options out there, and sometimes they tend to be a little bit cheaper than their Western watercolor. Like Winsor & Newton is just kind of expensive for what you get, you know? So Japanese, Chinese, Korean brands are also very good, and yeah, they just need some more love and attention. And Liz was saying, yeah, I found my Viridian paints were gummy. I prefer phthalo green too. I kind of wish they would just stop playing games and stop including Viridian and just do a phthalo blue. Because apparently that's a pretty common property with Viridian, is that it's just very difficult to activate. And then I find when I can get it to pick up, it's just very light, just unimpressive. It's just like a, why is this in my palette kind of color. So like I was saying though, one of the other things I like about PWC is that you get a lot of like really nice colors that would not typically be sold by Western companies. Like Winsor & Newton isn't going to have a lilac purple like this. That's a little bit, I'll swatch it for you guys, a little bit pastel. I don't love pastels in general, just because in general you can mix a good pastel by taking a color and adding, you know, titanium white to it. But some of these are colors that I wouldn't necessarily be able to mix that way. So and one thing I look for when I'm doing these reviews is I want to make sure that the colors are true. They're not muddy. They're not overly yellow from like a bad gum Arabic or a cheap gum Arabic. I want to see the color that I'm using shine through. And that is, in my opinion, the most noticeable when you're using ultramarine blue, because if you get kind of a nasty, cheap gum Arabic, it's not going to look like ultramarine blue. It's going to look like kind of a dirty, dingy blue tone. Now that I'm swatching these, I want to do a piece inspired by all the pretty pastels. So yeah, if you get the chance to try PWC watercolors, I highly recommend it. They dry out in half pans quite well, and they reactivate with no real problems. What, if anything, have people bought during World Watercolor Month sales? I'm gonna keep my mouth shut because I could get myself in trouble. A lot of palettes is what I've been buying. Is adding white to it different from just having more water with less paint of a color? It depends on what order of operations you're doing. So if we're just painting on white paper, there's no layers underneath it, then it's very similar. But adding white is going to add opacity. So if you painted this like lush green meadow and you wanted to do some flowers, you would either look for colors that have a little more opacity so you could paint them on top of that lush green meadow, or you might use masking fluid first to mask them out and then paint them in after, or you might go with pastels and mix in a little bit of white so that they pop off of the greens. So it's really, I know when it comes to like fine art circles, there's a little bit of like about that, like you should have masked that off to begin with. But I don't care. It's just another tool in the toolkit, and use the tools that work for you and help you achieve the paint you want to, or achieve the art you want to achieve. If you guys watch like Japanese watercolor videos where they're painting like manga-esque art or manga style art or anime style art, you'll typically see them using a lot of these kind of pastel colors, particularly the skin tone-esque colors, like Jaune Brilliant and Shell Pink. I actually avoid them in my own art just because I find that it makes my art look a little bit too doll-like, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's just a thing I'm not going for when I'm painting necessarily. Liz said, good question. I bought palettes, but I returned them all due to issues. Ah, I'm sorry. Are there any good sales going on right now that anyone wants to share? Geez, I feel like there are, and I feel like I can't think of any, which is awful. I'm pretty sure Blick's always having a sale of some sort, but I'm pretty sure Blick is having a World Watercolor Month sale right now. Now, whether or not what's on sale is a great deal, that's up to what you like to use. I'm going to go change my water cup out because you guys can see using all those pastels really muddies the water quickly. Oh, Utrecht, I think, is having a sale as well. But I couldn't, I had a $20 off coupon from Utrecht from filling out one of their surveys. So I used that, but I couldn't tell you if like the sale prices were particularly good or not, because I used that on something I was going to buy anyway, and it wasn't on sale. Okay, so next is the Paul Rubinstubens. Do I? Yes, I will go ahead and do all but the white. Why not? So this palette is probably going to be in my top whatever of 2021 because I happen to really like it. It's got some good colors. They handle very well. It's an easy to use palette. I felt like it was an exceptional deal. And I had reviewed Paul Rubens watercolors a while back. I'd gotten a set of half pants from Wish and I hated them. I think I got knockoffs. Ah, I forgot. This was just like straight up from the tube. Hadn't had a chance to dry yet. So one of the ways I kind of do paint and water control is for me working from mostly dry watercolors that I've then spritzed with a little bit of water helps prevent me from picking up too much paint. Particularly if the paints are made with gum arabic. I do like honey-based watercolor paints, but I find that those, like M. Graham's is a honey-based watercolor paint, Sennelier is a honey-based watercolor paint. Those tend to be, those are hydrophilic, which means they will absorb atmospheric water. Oh, I'm so sorry for burping. They'll absorb atmospheric water, and they can become very gummy, very soupy. They can kind of glob up onto your brush, and that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. Those are high quality watercolors, and I do enjoy painting with them, but that's something I have to keep in mind. So when it's as humid as it has been here, I will go for gum arabic based watercolors instead, because those are a little slower to activate and they're not going to suck up as much of the water from the atmosphere, and it's just going to be a little bit easier to do water control. So in terms of handmade watercolors and catching sales, my best recommendation for that would be to just follow them on Instagram. That's how I find out about when they're having sales. But I think a lot of us have been having issues with Instagram not showing us what we want to see and instead showing us what Instagram wants us to see. So that might not be such a great idea anymore. Gummy plus soupy equals swampy. I don't know. I think, yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Well, it's also something I want to avoid because then I'm picking up more paint than I can use on my brush, and it's all ending up in my rinse cup, and then it's all ending up down the drain. So I'm wasting a lot of money and I'm wasting a lot of paint. And I I think the set did come with this pad of Paul Rubens watercolor paper. So I think that made it an even better deal, but I'd have to double check. Anyway, Paul Rubens watercolor paper, block bound. It's, I had no problems with it. I liked it as a block bound watercolor paper. I'm not going to be able to swatch all the colors, I think, because I'm running out. Another one that I just refilled, and I somehow forgot that I did that. Just scrape it back into the half pans. So the Paul Rubens would definitely be a set I might recommend to somebody who wants professional grade watercolor paint. They want affordable professional grade watercolor paint. They want a variety of colors. They want the ability to be able to mix good skin tones, and they're not just reliant on the sometimes plastic feeling light pinks, but you get like a nice selection of browns and ochres as well. This set would be one of the ones I would probably recommend to somebody who was like, yeah, I'm willing to put some money down, or I got a birthday coming up. Now, I'm not necessarily always like a more color is mo better kind of person. Sometimes I feel like some brands hide behind having a lot of colors in the palette, like have cheaper quality, but they have so many colors that they kind of lure you in. I don't feel that way though about the Paul Rubens. I think their tube watercolors are really good, and I do recommend them. And Downya says, I only really do stories and post notifications now for IG. I just hate waiting through what someone else tells me I should want to see. Yeah, I haven't been checking mine as much as I used to. I was actually kind of thinking today, I sort of feel like internet curation really went downhill as feed readers died. Feed readers were kind of like the great way to follow a bunch of different, like you could have it follow Twitter accounts and Instagram accounts and people's blogs and people's Tumblrs. And like, it was a great way for me to kind of collate my social media experiences into something I wanted to see without getting a bunch of ads and without getting a bunch of recommendations that I didn't really care about. I'm gonna put this one off to the side. What I like too is that the color kind of soaked in instead of like with the Stonehenge, it was just kind of sitting on top. So the Paul Rubens paper does have a bit more sizing. I call it, the way I've noticed it is like a pulpy feeling versus a cardboardy feeling, and you kind of want that sweet spot. So next, I'm gonna grab a paper that I think has kind of a cardboardy feeling, and that would be the Saunders Waterford paper. Now, this paper is kind of hit or miss for me for a lot of reasons. It's kind of expensive in the US. There's a lot of store brand alternatives that I just like a bit better than the Saunders. And this one is definitely a more cardboardy cotton rag watercolor paper. So I'm gonna go change out my rinse water, and I'm gonna start with some of the handmade watercolors that I really like. And then if there's space, I'll shift over to my Daily Driver palettes. Without getting a bunch of ads is why RSS mostly fell out of favor. So the thing was, Google got rid of their feed reader, and I never found a feed reader I liked as much as Google Reader. And I tried a couple of different ones, but Google's feed reader was just good. Like, it was bare bones, not a lot of options, but I could add almost any kind of account that I wanted to. Like, it would let me do Instagram and Tumblr, and some of the other feed readers wouldn't let me do that. And it let me do YouTube as well. It was just a good way for me to kind of keep up with a lot of information. So I feel like I was way more on top of comics news and art supply news when feed readers were accessible than I am now, where I'm reliant on social media and I'm like never seeing the stuff I want to see. actually, I think last week somebody suggested that Joseph should program a social media for artists. I think a better use of his time would be a really good feed reader app. And that way it doesn't matter what social media people are posting on. They could follow the artists they enjoy without, and then ideally, a truly good app would also let you interact with their stuff. Because that was also kind of the problem with feed readers for me, is that I couldn't interact. If I liked somebody's post, I couldn't hit like. I had to go through all these extra steps, you know, to leave comments or to leave a like or whatever. So to me, like an ideal feed reader app would allow you to do a bunch of different social media sites and leave an appropriate response so people realize that you're actually seeing their work and you're enjoying their work. So I'm going to start with the Black Sheep Art Supply watercolors. These have a lovely clove smell, and the clove is important because it's a disinfectant. Do I mean antifungal? It has preservation properties. And while I do enjoy handmade watercolors, to me they're kind of a luxury niche because I feel like a lot of the handmade watercolors in the US and in Canada in general, this is a massive generalization, there's a lot of them over on Etsy. A lot of them are either getting their pigments from like the same 4 companies if they're using natural pigments, or they're using cosmetic grade pigments, which like mica, like hollow, and there's nothing wrong. Actually, I should grab one of the sets Kabocha sent me as well. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not exciting for me personally to review a bunch of different companies. I think this is one of the newer sets. Cabo needs to label them with like Mach 1, Mach 2, Mach 3 so I can keep up with them. V1, V2, V3. Oh wait, are these my Sennelier ones? What are you? Oh yeah, those are Sennelier. Oh, I know they sent me another box recently. Well, I guess these are the ones we'll take a look at. So these are made with cosmetic grade pigments. So you've got chameleon pigments, you've got a lot of mica, and she kind of walked me through her process for making handmade watercolors in a stream. So I'm not going to go into that into too much depth. See, what I'd be interested in is Toronto Ink Company selling their handmade paints, because I know he goes out and like forages berries and ink gall and walnut gall and stuff like that. Not walnut gall. Ugh. Oak gall. There we go. And Joseph's saying, I'm talking about a social network aggregator, and he doesn't think that would work because it would violate the TOSs, probably. Yeah, probably, but it's the internet we all deserve. Because, gee, I'm in the same boat. So many artists are like, I want to leave Twitter, I want to leave Instagram, but I have an audience here, or there are people who used to follow me. Like for me, with my account, I think there's a lot of people who have just like left Twitter and they didn't delete their accounts. So it looks like I have a lot of followers, but I get really low engagement. And my dream feed aggregator would kind of eliminate the need to switch social networks that you've already established yourself on, because people who enjoy your work could just add you to their feed. Hey Jill, good evening. I'm glad you can make it. It's been a while. I hope you're doing well. Hopefully you're able to get some rest now that it's like the middle of summer and you're not juggling schoolwork. And I can really smell the clove from these, but it doesn't leave any kind of like a resist. It doesn't leave like an oily film on the paper or anything like that. So when it comes to cotton rag paper, kind of regardless of whether it has a lot of sizing in it, whether it has a vegetable-based sizing or a gelatin-based sizing, and gelatin-based sizings I think are still more common. Once it gets kind of difficult to keep painting, allowing your paper to dry out fully, and that'll allow it to kind of tighten back up and to kind of close some of those fibers. It gives the paper a chance to rest, and I think, for me at least, it kind of results in a better watercolor illustration when I've taken enough breaks to kind of let the paper rest. And I mean, you know, me taking a break and letting my brain rest and coming back to it with fresh eyes is also probably great. So something else I like about the Black Sheep watercolors, the initial set, the starter set, I think is 6 colors. So I think these 6 here, I've been buying them open stock as well. And it's $25. It used to be $25 for the initial 6, I want to say. And it's like $5 to $7 for additional half pans. Resting has, oh, hang on, let me get caught back up. Calvin says, I'm watching this while painting, so I'm not very active in the chat. That's fine. I always love it when you guys paint along. It's like nice company. Jill says, resting has been lovely. Thanks. I'm so glad. I'm so glad you're able to get some rest. And Kara is great. If you're not reading it yet, you're missing out. Aw, thank you. And Calvin said, I'm watching paint dries. Yeah. And Liz said, me too. I'm kind of researching, but I'm listening. That's good though. That makes me happy. To me, it would be, honestly, like, no lie, I'm not here to like alienate anybody, but it'd be a little weird if somebody was like, I'm watching super intently, because it's like, I'm swatching watercolors and talking about watercolors. Like, you could do that, but I would feel bad for them. This is more designed to be just kind of chat and company, but also if people have questions about different brands or my experiences with different brands, then this is a good opportunity to kind of talk about that. So these are the beam paints. This is their like their travel set of 6. So beam paints are made in Canada. You can tell my water's polluted and I need to switch it out because this is kind of dingy looking. It's more dingy looking in real life, but once you start seeing that with your watercolor, you definitely need to go change your paint water out. I believe Beam is the owner's family last name, and that it's a family business, so like even extended and family are involved, which is really cool. The paints tend to be a little bit on the pricier side, but in general, people seem to really love them, and I've had positive experiences with them so far. I haven't had a chance yet to do a field test with these because I was kind of thinking about taking them on vacation with me and trying to use them to do like plein air painting. Now, something cool about beam paints is if you're trying to reduce how much plastic and how much waste you're using and generating, I think everything involved with beam paints is either made by them or recycled. So, and they also use Manitoulin honey. So these are honey-based handmade paints. So what they do is this is a waxed wrap, and they wrap that around what they call their paint stones. And you can also get these beautiful wooden palettes from them as well. Okay, Liz asked, how do the beam paint stones compare to a half pan? That is a really good question. I'm gonna turn this one over because it's mostly dry. So if it went all the way deep, let me move my finger so you can see. If it went all the way deep, it'd be a little bit more than a half pan. It doesn't. I would say it's probably 3/4 of a half pan. But then again, you know, with half pans, if you're filling them from tubes like these over here, as you might fill it all the way to the top, but as they dry, they're going to contract and shrink. So I'd still say about 3/4 of a half pan for these. For the ones in the wooden rounds, I don't have one. Those are poured in the wood, so you might be getting more paint like that. But for these, it's about 3/4 of a half pan. But I mean, also, I haven't been working with them for super long. So like, remember how these here are a little bit smaller than your average half pan. But I've had this palette for like 3 or 4 years now. I use this palette all the time, and I still have paint in a lot of the half pans. So some brands last longer than others. Some brands, let me clean that off. Some brands you can get more out of them. So with Beam, you might be able to get more out of it. And I just haven't been using it long enough to like definitively be like, okay, you get less paint, but it lasts longer than your average half pan. And then when it comes to handmade paints, hang on a sec, let me throw something away. Many paint makers are super secretive about their processes. Like, they won't tell you what binder they're using. They won't tell you if there's any preservatives. They won't tell you if there's any additives. When Kabocha came and talked about their paint making process, they were very transparent and honest about what they used and what worked for them. But that's kind of the exception to the rule. It was Jill, it was super positive. It was mostly just, yeah, how supportive you've been and how much that means to me over the years. I'm gonna go change out my water and swatch the paints that Kabocha sent. And turn on the fan because this is getting hot in here. Liz, I wish I could give you a more concrete answer. I definitely think you probably get more paint with the Black Sheep art supplies if you're just looking for paint volume. Okay, so these are handmade. She also uses clove as a preservative, watercolor. These are made with cosmetic pigments, so sparkle and duochrome and iridescence, rather than with like earth and mineral pigments. Now, generally when I'm painting, so you guys probably don't see me review a whole lot. Comparatively, I don't review a lot of special effects watercolors on the channel. And mostly that's because a lot of what I do is intended for reproduction, for like inclusion in books, rather than for commissions. So when I'm looking at paints, I'm looking for colors and pigments that my scanner can pick up and do justice to. But these sort of special effects paints can be really fun for commissions. They can be really fun for brush lettering. They can be a great way to make having an original in your home feel more special, because it has this special effect that only an original would have. And Kabocha was very generous in talking about where they source the cosmetic pigments they use, what kind of gum arabic they found works the best, what kind of ratio works well for them. Something I've noticed is that it's hard for me to show you guys. You see how there's like half size, they're like quarter pans in there. So that's becoming kind of popular on AliExpress. So something I've noticed, maybe those of you who have bought those sets and have some more experience can, you know, tell me what's up. It's becoming more ubiquitous to see people pouring, like, I want to think about how I want to phrase this because I also have some suspicions about this. Okay, so like, let's say we went on AliExpress and I looked up Sennelier. I would be able to find, not Sennelier tubes, but I would be able to find sets where someone has theoretically taken Sennelier tubes of paint and poured it into these quarter pans, and they're basically selling that as a sampler. And if I knew for a fact that was Sennelier, so if I, or whatever brand, if I knew for a fact it was the brand they said it was, then that could be a good way to affordably review some of these supplies, because it's just it's a sample amount, you know. The problem is I've been burnt by AliExpress and Wish before, and the vendors I typically buy from and trust don't do that. So I haven't yet had a chance to like try it out and get burnt yet. But like, I'd like to try Handmade Watercolors. I think they're either Chinese or they're Italian, and I've only seen them on AliExpress. But they're 10 plus a tube for even the cheapest tubes. But I could buy the weird little quarter pans, and people are saying those are the Martini paints, but sorry, in terms of reviewing something, unless I 100% know it is that paint. So like, if one of y'all sent me something, or if Kabocha sent me something, I would trust that it was the paint y'all said it was, right? Because like, we talk pretty often. I trust you guys for the most part. I trust Kabocha pretty well. So like, I would trust that y'all weren't just sending me some terrible knockoff paint telling me it was really like grams or something. But I don't know these people. I'm not able to watch their process. I know that's probably like kind of paranoid, but I would hate to give a good brand a bad review because I was too cheap or couldn't justify spending the money it takes to buy the real deal. You know, like that just seems unfair. Okay, so Joseph said, how do watercolor palette tins compare to makeup palette tins in quality? And Joseph said, I guess makeup ones are usually plastic. So that's a really good question. I'm about to get myself in trouble with you. There are some really nice magnetic makeup tins where you use metal metal pans, like the letter sparrow ones I showed you. And it's basically just a metal tin with a big magnetic sheet, and you can rearrange your palette however you like. And I have been eyeballing that hard as like that could be a really cool watercolor palette. Something that allows you to rearrange it as you need it, to take pans out, to put pans in very easily. So there are higher quality makeup palettes that would work really well for watercolor. And I think, I want to say her name is Jessica Charlie, did a tutorial on cleaning out eyeshadow palettes and refilling it with watercolor for an inexpensive travel palette. So you could definitely do that. I mean, if you get really cheap makeup, sometimes it's plastic, but sometimes it's metal. And Calvin said, look like the... Oh no, I'm sorry. Hopefully they get the power on for you soon. And Calvin also said people on Etsy like to sell hand pour half pan of Daniel Smith paint. See, that's another example of like, I don't know, that starting the Etsy rabbit hole could be a whole conversation. Because I really don't like how many people are buying stuff off of AliExpress and then reselling it on Etsy. But that's now allowed, so what are you gonna do? But yeah, I'm real iffy on the like, unless I knew the person, buying a sample of the paint, because I don't know them. Oh, I'm gonna tell Camo you said that. She probably would agree. All right, I'm gonna go switch my water out. What paint have I not? Ooh, we could talk about some of the super granulating paints before I switch over to student grade. I feel like some of the changes Etsy's made has just made it harder to compete as someone who makes things by hand. And I currently don't sell anything on Etsy. I used to years ago, and it's already kind of hard to sell on. It was already hard to sell on Etsy back then. So I feel like it's a lot harder to sell on Etsy when, yeah, you're competing for attention against people who are buying tubes of Daniel Smith watercolor, maybe pouring it into half and quarter pans and then selling it and making, you know, a decent chunk of a markup. And I can see the value if you're an honest agent in doing that. If you're legitimately buying Daniel Smith watercolors and you are selling them to people who otherwise would not have access to that because it's not sold in that country due to, you know, different reasons, then I could understand that. The library requests are a big help for me. That's something I cannot do for myself. Like, if I submitted a library request for my own book, they would just throw that away. But libraries do take that seriously, and it really helps spread the word about it. What am I doing? Oh, I'd repurpose this palette. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about super granulating watercolors, which is kind of an obsession of mine right now because they make for some decent, easy watercolor backgrounds. If I can find, I mean, I'm going to do it anyway, but I'm looking for that tin where I have the Daniel Smith ones. Joseph said there can't be enough margins in that. They must be cutting the paint. Oh no! Oh no! No! They're not selling this for cheap, my dear. First of all, if you buy a tube like this, depending on the color, you could fill. I can get from the smaller tube. Let me grab it. Oh, big stretch. This tube will fill a half pan 3 times. I can fill a half pan, so that's 5, this is 15, 9 times with this. I could do 9 half pans from this tube alone. And they're charging like $5 for a half pan, or up, depends on what it is. And some of them are doing the quarter pans that I showed you guys. Where did I put it? Here it is. So these here, so you could do what, 18 fills? And some of them are doing, I don't even own any because they're a joke. They are literally the size of like a chiclet piece of gum. They're so tiny. They're like this size but flat. Some of them are selling that. It's like a joke. It looks like it's for a doll's house. And they're selling that at a markup. So it's just huge. I would think it's just hugely time consuming, but okay, I'm not seeing the palette I wanted. So I'm just gonna progress. Just gonna move on. So what I really like about super granulating watercolors is you can just do the color itself. but that's not nearly as impressive as doing a wash. I want to pick one that's like real showy. And then dabbing the color in. And then when it dries, it granulates out into the individual colors. So these are really, I think these are really cool. And the ones I have here, these are from Supervision, but Paul Rubens makes them now. I know Schminke makes them, but I don't have any of the Schminke ones yet. I should pivot the channel. I wouldn't even call them watercolor scammers, unless I found out that they were selling something that is different from the paints they claim it is. But they're scalpers, you know, and like my opinion of that kind of scalping is like, if it's not accessible in your country, if it's very expensive in your country and you want to buy that, I understand. But that also tells me there's a hole in the market for test sets where some of these companies should be doing more dot cards and stuff and making their watercolors more accessible. But I don't even know if they're really hurting from this. So I hope you guys can start to see some of the granulation separating out. Van Gogh also makes some there's several companies that do, but Van Gogh also makes some super granulating watercolors. They call them their dusk colors, and I think there's 4 colors in their set. These kind of remind me of the Bocco Undo watercolors. So it's basically a staining color and then lunar black, because lunar black really granulates. But you could make your own with any pigment that has like a large particle size and is prone to granulation, so like ultramarine or a lot of the earth minerals like yellow ochre. Actually, that would be really pretty, like a yellow ochre with a phthalo blue. You're gonna get me a voice changer, so I don't even have to talk to anybody. It's all done. I could buy it from AliExpress. Are you encouraging me to do an expose on watercolor? Do you know how much money that will cost? And also, I don't know that I could legitimately prove that something is a dupe, like not the actual paint. For example, the Chinese Winsor & Newton, people were thinking it was a knockoff, but it is legitimately produced by Winsor & Newton. It's just produced in China using Chinese minerals to Chinese watercolor standards. So it's just like a totally different product. It's not meant to be like the way Winsor & Newton watercolors are over here. It's supposed to be different. So I feel like AliExpress, often a lot of the use case context is removed. So it would be very difficult to tell if something was a scam or just my ignorance. I think the Roman Schmalls super granulating colors are some of the prettiest ones. I mean, part of me is tempted to do that, but I'm also like thinking that is such a colossal expense, and then to just have to end the series with like, okay, so I did like 30 sets, so, and of course I would do brands that I have, you know, so I would definitely do like Holbein, Winsor & Newton, Sennelier. M. Graham's is a popular one on AliExpress right now, so it would be stuff that I'm used to, but I still feel like I wouldn't be able to tell. That's Van Dyke Brown. Is this Aquarius Green? No, it's Ocean Blue. Where did Aquarius Green run off to? For real, oh, it's in the set. Oh, back up. Come on, girl. Do y'all like how Joseph obviously is yanking my chain, but I'm over here like, I don't know. Let me do the logistics. Let me think about it. Let me figure out if that's even worth pursuing, like taking it very seriously. It certainly would be good YouTube. I'm sure someone is gonna, like, next week, Eve Bolt, that video will come out, you know? That's my luck. It's, what is it about good ideas and like several people having them at the same time? And that would be Aquarius green, and Aquarius green is pretty similar to ocean green. From, oh no, Undersea green, there we go, from Daniel Smith. So hopefully you guys can see why I think the super granulating colors are really cool. You get a lot of bang for your buck. They're just fun. And like, I've been doing more with Chinese and Korean watercolors because they're coming out with more fun stuff. Like, I'll give you guys a sneak peek on an unboxing swatch I just wrapped up because it was fun. Like, it brought a smile to my face. It was just a fun product. So I'm gonna move this pad out of the way. I feel like a little bit like I'm on a leash because I got a lavalier mic on, so I can only go so far. Stay there. Stay there. And then what? What am I? Oh, student grade. If I'm gonna do student grade, then I should do the Blick Studio block, just because I use the Blick Studio block a lot, and I'll be able to. So if you're gonna use student grade watercolors, I have opinions. Boy, do I have opinions. Not about you, but about which ones are pretty good, which ones are kind of overpriced, and what paper will give you the best results with the cheapest paints. So it is 9:30. I'm gonna take a 5-minute break. I recommend you guys get some water, stretch, go to the bathroom, grab a snack, whatever you need to do, because we're gonna pivot over to student grade paints in about 5 minutes. Let me put up that away. Okay, so I have been taking a look at a lot of student grade watercolors. So historically, I have not liked student grade watercolors because here in the US, Cotman and Sennelier student grade and Lucas Studio, they're all kind of expensive for what they are and not really that great. So usually I would recommend that people just go ahead and buy the professional grade because you're going to use up those paints really quickly. They're not that great. You're not really saving that much money. But then China started releasing, not China as a whole country, but you know, Chinese manufacturers started releasing some pretty dang good student grade watercolors. So I happen to really like the Mei Liang Pretty Excellent pigments. So these are made by Paul Rubens and they're not bad at all. They come in a metal tin. Inside the metal tin though, they're in a fairly flimsy holder like this and they're extruded paints. The site says they're poured. They're extruded paints. We could talk about the pros and cons of poured paints over extruded paints if you guys would like. But basically, it's cheaper to extrude them. Think of it like a cookie press or Play-Doh, where you're pushing out and then cut, and then boop, 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 rather than pouring it where you pour it and you have to let it dry. So it's just slightly less nice, and I don't know why they'd lie about it because it's kind of a dumb thing to lie about. So typically with student grade watercolors, you see these bright, brilliant, beautiful colors, and you're like, I gotta have those. Those look great. Well, the reason they're so bright and beautiful is they include a lot of optical brighteners, which isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world. Sometimes those optical brighteners, and that's typically PW6, which is the same white pigment used in gouache. It's titanium white. It's just an extender. It's just to make the colors look good in the half pans and be cheaper to produce because PW6 is cheaper than most other pigments. I think it might even be derived from like the shells of shellfish. It's like if I might be wrong though. That's like titanium white. Yeah, I'm thinking of the other one. Anyway, it's cheap. So that's why they include it to kind of extend it. And there can be other extenders included in student grade paints as well. So it's not just pigment, a preservative, gum arabic, or honey. It could be glycerin. It could be all kinds of other fillers. Again, not necessarily the end of the world, but not as cheap as you think they are because they're including all these extenders. So it's kind of like buying freezer French fries versus getting French fries even at McDonald's. You know, not quite the same. But that doesn't mean they're terrible or unusable. Just means they're different. And I just wanted to point out those differences because a lot of companies, especially like Cotman, the way they present the paints makes them seem like they're as good as their professional line, or they may present them as professional paints. Now, the Mia paints, and these are made by the Himi Mia company that does those jelly gouache cups that everybody loved 2 years ago. They say this is their highest line, but I found that these handle like student grade paints. And both of these sets are $20, so they're very inexpensive. I actually paid double that for this one here because I bought it from my local brick and mortar. I knew I was paying more, but I wanted to support a business that I liked, so I wasn't going to quibble over it. But in general, I would not recommend paying that much for student grade watercolors. About 20 is fine. And you are going to see all kinds of different sets like this. Like I also recently reviewed the Shapiro Farben watercolor paints. Those are packed away, so I can't reach them. And they're okay. They're more expensive than these though, so I would recommend these. So, okay, give me 1 second. I'll backtrack for you. Not a problem. Poured paint would be like poured from a tube. I mean, in the company, they're not going to pour, or in the factory, they're not going to pour from a tube. They're going to have a machine pouring it. But it's going to, do I have any? These look. like they were poured, okay? So you see how there's kind of a rough nature to it. It's got an uneven top, like maybe somebody scraped off the excess. This is what poured paints look like. And typically poured paints tend to reactivate a little bit quicker than extruded paints because they're not as dry as extruded paints. Extruded paints, can I pry one of these out? I don't think so. Extruded paints are just, it's like a dry cookie dough, and they just kind of extrude them from the machine, cut, and then put them in the palette. So with student grade watercolors in general, and just with watercolor in general, I always spritz it with water first so that it can kind of absorb that water and pre-activate. So this thing, I just wrapped up the review for this, and I hope you guys will watch it, but I'm gonna spoil it. I had no idea whether this thing would be good or bad. I reviewed their folding fan one a couple years ago, and I was just so distracted by the fact that I couldn't paint with it because it wobbled all over the place that I was like, I don't know if the paints are any good. I also reviewed their watercolor watch, and I liked that a lot better, but I was a little bit concerned by how thin the chiclets of paint were in that. So this thing, I was interested in this thing because it kind of reminds me of a Gensai style color palette. Yes, Cotman paints are difficult. There's a lot of problems with, start me on Cotman. There's a lot of problems with Cotman paint. So this thing is so weird. I kind of love it, but it is also very weird. So it's a folding style palette. They say it's a travel palette. For me, this takes up too much space for me to use it. You know, if I were like on the beach or at a botanical garden, this might not be the palette I would bring with me. It would be full of sand. It does have a loop on the back though. And it's just not necessarily sturdy enough. It will hold its shape, but it's not necessarily sturdy enough for me to be like, I'm gonna bring that to a convention because it takes up a lot of space. What's kind of cool about this though is you do get open pans. I don't want to say large because look how thin they are. Is that a joke? Like, they're so ridiculous. This is about $20 as well. So I would not pay more than, let's say, $25 for this set. And let me see if I can pry one of these out without breaking it, because that might give you guys a good idea of what extruded paints will look like. But basically, you see how they look kind of fake? I'm not going to be able to describe this very well. I'm so sorry. I like without like roasting it. And I actually like this palette. It's all right, you know, so I don't want to like roast it, but it's cheap. It looks cheap, and it performs well for something that looks cheap. And it's kind of fun because it performs well for something that looks that cheap, you know? But you can kind of see some of the extrusion lines on some of these. And I've just found that with student grade paints, they're probably going to be extruded and they're probably not going to be as good. So I'm going to spray this one, and I'm going to try to swatch all three palettes. What's cool about this is almost double the number of colors you get in the other two palettes. So those are both 36. This is 58 colors, and you get a lot of pastels, those kind of Gensai-esque colors. So I know, Calvin, you were saying you're not a huge fan of the Kuretake Gensai Tombi because it tends to, the paints don't handle the way you want them to. This might actually be more, I know you like working with limited paint, so probably not, but if it was those pastels that you're looking for, this might be more along the lines of something that you might enjoy painting with. And the chat says, Himimiya is Hima's drunk persona. It's like it's your VTuber personality. And Jill loves the Mei Liang Pretty Excellent set. Yeah, I do too. Actually, if you like the Mei Liang, you will probably like the Mia set even more because you can actually get your brush in this thing. Calvin said, not a big fan of Winsor & Newton Cotman paint. They're difficult to re-wet. Yes. Yeah, they have such poor color payoff. And Jill said, agreed, Calvin. I almost gave up watercolor after using Cotmans because I was so frustrated. Then I found this nifty, great. Then Jill found me, which led me to getting myself some professional paint. See, that's one of the reasons why for years I kind of railed against student grade that costs a lot of money, is I have so many friends who almost quit watercolor because they just couldn't paint the way they saw other people painting, and a lot of it was coming down to paints that are not very good. I'm so glad it made a positive difference. Joseph said uniform is probably what I mean. Yeah, probably uniform, but also like cheap is what I mean, like mass produced, cookie cutter, inexpensive budget. And there's not, I shop at Dollar Tree. Like there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. I just, my deal is like, I want people to know that's what they're getting, you know, like I like Dollar Tree because I know what I'm getting. I like Daiso because I know what I'm getting. So with the Mijello and Mia palettes, it has decent granulation. There is some optical brightener, so you are going to muddy the water fast. I haven't had a chance to field test the Mia palette yet. It's been so super duper rainy. I haven't been painting much at all. But I did field test the Mijello palette, and I found that I was able to mix colors very easily. I was able to layer colors easily. It didn't turn to mud on me. So I was pleased. I was like, yeah, this is pretty excellent. And I realized, I mean, I kind of knew this for a while, but it definitely solidified for me that I actually don't really care about brand name. I don't really care about how expensive it is. In fact, I prefer if it's cheaper because then I can introduce more people to it and I don't mind loaning it to people. I care about, does it do what it says it's going to do? And can you make art with it? And if it delivers on those two things, then I'm good with it. If it makes these big promises about being professional grade and I know it's not, if it promises like 100 years of light path and I know it's not, if it's difficult to work with, frustrating to work with, if it lifts very easily, you know, that's when I have like an attitude with it. When it doesn't do what it says it's gonna do, and I can't research why, like, and I, you know, like with the Gansai watercolors, those can be kind of frustrating, especially on cellulose watercolor papers. Gansai style watercolors are very frustrating to use because they just slough off the paper surface. But with cotton rag or origami paper, they kind of soak into the paper, so they're not as prone to just turning to glue. So, you know, that was a problem that I could research and find a solution for and then be like, oh, and I grew to like them. But with some inexpensive watercolor supplies, it doesn't matter how hard I try, I'll never like them. Like the Radiant watercolors, the dye-based liquid watercolors, I just have to, I've seen other people make really good art with them. I'm terrible with them. I just have to accept that they're not gonna, that's not a good fit for me. So if you're looking for a lot of color, you don't want to do a lot of color mixing. You just want to like grab the colors you want and go. You don't want to spend a lot of money. These three sets here are all going to answer that. They're all going to be a good fit for that. My biggest complaint with these is that they don't offer refills. And these two, the Mia and the Mijello, the interior plastic that the paints are in is very, very cheap and flimsy. So you could refill it as you go. But it's not as nice as individual half pans, because usually my recommendation if someone is going to start with a student grade set is that they replace the pans they're using all the time. They work on replacing that with a professional grade paint as they go. You can't quite do that with this. My big complaint with the Goofy Superior palette is that they don't seem to sell now. I mean, maybe you guys might know better than I, but they don't seem to sell refills for it. So like once you've used these up, you can pour, like for a yellow ochre, you could pour your own yellow ochre in there and like, you know, scrape off the top and let it dry. But like for some of these colors, maybe. Now what I'm going to do is I will probably use it until it's all used up. and then fill it with my favorite watercolors. But, you know, I would like it if they at least made the refills available, because when I was reading the reviews for and I usually don't read the reviews when I'm doing my own review, but I was on Amazon and I just happened to see some of the reviews, and people like this palette a lot, and were like, yeah, I plan on buying 2 or maybe 3 of them. I can see myself buying many of them. And that's a problem that could be solved just by offering refills, you know? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay. Which paint am I? Number 3. I'm gonna have to change the water out in between though. So far I've been doing everything on different cotton rag papers. They're all papers I like for various reasons. This is the Blick Studio cotton rag paper. While it's good to paint, like do illustrations on, typically I use this when I'm doing reviews because it's a cotton rag paper, block bound. I would say very similar to Arches, but much cheaper. So I happen to really like this paper, but I never really I don't get to paint on it too much. Get on it. Man. So Joseph, years ago, with what is it, Live 2D Euclid? Why can't I talk? Live 2D Euclid. Joseph was like, oh, you ought to get on that, and you ought to make like a Cara, and you ought to make yourself, and you ought to make a pancake, and then you can have the camera like just be that. That was what that cat thing was a couple years ago. And I was like, I want to, and that's a really cute idea, but I don't have the time, and I don't know how to do 3D rigging, and I just kind of put it off forever. And now the VTuber thing is like big again, and I'm over here like, oh, I could have a kawaii desu mascot. Why am I Boo Boo the Clown? Can I remove the plastic tray and put half pans? The only one you could maybe do that with is the Pretty Excellent. I will attempt to do this without making a mess, but we all know I'm gonna make a mess. So it's just cheap plastic in there. Which is, you know, that gets the job done. Oh, come on, there we go. They originally glued it in. So usually with these kind of palettes, they include another tray that sits right here, and that's what you'd put your half pans in. But you could totally use like magnets on the back of your half pans and magnet them to the bottom of this, but you can't have both, is one of the concerns. Yeah, I missed that horse. Yeah, it's Nikuma. So it basically is a glue. It's like an animal hide glue that glues the pigments onto the paper. It's like, like when I saw you saying that, I was like, yeah, I get you. For me, it's Crayola is like painting with soap because of the glycerin that makes it washable. Sorry to bump it with my head. I was fighting with the lavalier mic. Tally said that's fine because I'd like to reuse the palette. Yeah, it's a metal palette. It comes in cute colors. I would say it's as well made as any of my metal palettes. So yeah, you could probably do that without too much hassle. All right, so What's funny, I had the fan on in here because it's hot and it's already dried the water I spritzed on these, but I have no fear that these are going to activate quickly. It did the same to my Mia paints as well. And I went and got a cup of clean water because that water was so dirty by the time I finished swatching all of them. And that's definitely one of the ways you can tell you're painting with student grade paints is how quickly the water turns to just like chocolate milk. So if you're on the market for less expensive student grade watercolors, the Mei Liang and the Mia are both, I think, great options. I would not pay more than $25 for either of them. So one thing you can do is you can, and they're not a sponsor, I use Honey, and it basically will watch what's in your Amazon cart and wait list and let you know when something is at an all-time low price. You can also use Camel for that as well. Sausage links. So there's like bands. Now I kind of want to draw that. Oh man, when I get back to doing drawing live streams on occasion, I want to have like people pitch like awful ideas for VTubers, and I want to sketch that. I think that would be pretty amusing. I got some other important stuff to do though before I can do another sketch request stream. Honey does something similar, right? What? Similar to glycerin or similar to Nikuma? With Nikuma, once it's on the paper, it's glued to the paper. It's on the paper. Especially if it's like origami paper or cotton rag paper, it's on there. See, I didn't like Van Gogh. But I also kind of found out through a lot of trial and error that a lot of European paints are just more opaque than like Korean and Japanese and English and American paints. And I didn't like that. So I don't like Rembrandt paints all that much. And Van Gogh is the student grade of Rembrandt. So I just felt like it was kind of like painting with mud. Oh, Honey the app. Sorry. Yes. Honey, I have it set to let me know when anything in my Amazon waitlist or cart has dropped. And it'll also tell you when stuff's at like a historic low. So if you're like being really, if you're being stubborn about it and you're like, I want to buy these Daniel Smith watercolors, but I don't want to pay too much. I want to get them at the cheapest price they've ever been, ever. Then yeah, Honey will let you know when they're at the cheapest price they've ever been. Now, the nice thing about Van Gogh watercolors is the plastic clamshell they come in, while it takes up a lot of space, is really well built. And I'll say that for Cotman as well. The palette they come in is nice. So if you were buying those, or well, you bought that as like your starter set, and then you wanted to add in professional colors, you wouldn't necessarily have to, get a different palette. Whereas with this, like, you can fill it from a tube, but that's your option. Like, you're not going to be able to buy weird diagonal shaped half pans. Oh, dang, it's 10 already. And I was just telling Joseph we're going to go get beignets at 10. And I'm always on the search for a good watercolor sketchbook. Like, nicer than the Canson XL watercolor sketchbooks I buy. And I know Stillman and Burn, some people swear by them. For me, I think the paper to me is like cardstock weight, so I'm not super into that. So I have all these watercolor sketchbooks by the side of my desk that I need to... I'm kind of like waffling on how to review them because my paper reviews are one of the least popular things here on the channel. So maybe I'll just do like a watercolor sketchbook showdown and make like an Omega video. I even painted on Easter eggs with the Mei Liang pigments, and they did okay. Like, it wasn't the paint that made it not fun. Painting on eggs is just not fun. Like, real eggs that I had blown, that was not fun. But the paints were great. So I don't know. This is like, to me, this is like an interesting time for art supplies because we're getting a lot of neat stuff from China, and their designers are really thinking outside the box and trying new things. And we're not necessarily getting a lot of interesting, innovative stuff from the US. So, you know, except then for the Chinese watercolor stuff, it can be harder to find. And if you do find it in a brick and mortar store, then, you know, it can be way more expensive than it is online. So if you don't like ordering from AliExpress, or you've had bad experiences with AliExpress, you know. Okay, so this is the Mei Liang. This is the Mia. I'm going to go switch out my water, and then we'll do the ridiculous superior watercolor set. They make such, like, just different kind of stuff. Superior. I feel like they ought to make some, like, cardstocky. I'm sure they make paper mache eggs. Joseph said showdowns probably do worse because they don't get as much search traffic. I don't know. When I used to do When I used to do showdowns with alcohol markers, those were some of my most popular videos at the time because you can list all those brand names in the tags. And Tali said, besides these 3 paints, what other student grade paints would you recommend? Let me switch my water out and I'll get back to you. But I have some suggestions, but Jennifer said, have I tried the Strathmore 400 series sketchbooks? I really like their mixed media kind. The visual journals, I love the mixed media visual journals. Those are, like, I use those in October for my inking challenge because it's like a cotton rag paper and they're just fun to draw on and ink on. I have painted in them a little bit, and they don't really handle like watercolor paper, but once you get over that, and you kind of learn how to get what you want from them and what you can do on them, I like them a lot. I think they're fun. I just wish they did the smaller ones in spiral bound, because I think the smaller ones you can only do them hardbound, and that's just harder for me. But yeah, I really like those. And Holly asked about other student grade watercolors that I would recommend. So in general, there aren't really. I picked these because I do really like them. I do like the Sakura Koi watercolors. I used to use those all the time for convention commissions for years. I was able to get really bright saturated color very quickly. I was able to mix the colors that I needed very easily. I could do a lot of layering with those, so I did really like Sakura Koi watercolors, but other than that, I haven't really found a lot of student grade watercolors that I like, especially that are like common in the US. So I wish I had a different answer for you. But I've tried a bunch, and I'm always trying to keep trying, even though I know even though I have strong feelings about student grade watercolors in general, and they're not usually my preference, I do try to keep looking at them and reviewing them and borrowing them from friends when I can, because I am always in the search for good, affordable options for people, because I want art to be more accessible. And unfortunately, the thing about watercolor is it doesn't have to be, like, compared to acrylic and oils, it's actually pretty cheap. A little goes a long way. A tube of watercolor paint might last you years, might last you dozens of paintings, whereas a tube of acrylic might, if you're lucky, last you a couple paintings depending on the size. So I feel like watercolor kind of gets a bum rap. Like, it's treated like it's very, very expensive, when really it's quite economical compared to other professional art forms. And I mean, digital art kind of cements that. Like, so I started my art life as a digital artist. My first degree is in digital art, and one of my friends who got me into it originally, her rationale is like, it's an infinite sketchbook. Like, once you have Paint Tool Sci or Photoshop or Clip Studio Paint or Open Canvas, whatever was popular at the time, once you have that and a tablet, you have an infinite amount of digital paper. You have an infinite amount of digital color. And that kind of makes everything else, when you have infinity at your fingertips, that kind of makes everything else expensive, So I feel like comparing it to the price point of digital art is unfair, especially these days where you can do digital art on an old cell phone with your finger. Like, there are people who do really nice digital art pieces. I can't. I've tried, but they can, with like a Dollar Tree stylus on an old phone. So to me, to compare traditional art against digital art, that's just unfair. They're very different. And I'm not railing at you at all, Tali. So please, I hope you don't feel that way. I'm just more like working through some stuff, thinking some thoughts. But I think traditional art has a lot that makes it just super unique and valuable and fun and exciting, that makes it different from digital art, So I think both deserve to exist. Both are valid. And when I was just out of grad school, that's when I decided I was like going to commit myself to the world of digital art. And that's when traditional art. That's when a lot of publishers decided they didn't want anything to do with traditional art. They wanted everything. They didn't even want you scanning it and sending it to them. They just wanted you to do it all digitally, like digital watercolor, or digital inks, no traditional anything. And now they're kind of coming back around. Hema said, I've been reading the LL Compendium a little bit before bed every now and then. That's nice. I'm like halfway through. Yeah, that's a chonker of a book. And Jennifer said the 400 series is their 100% cotton line. Their 400 series, I think they have the watercolor paper in that line as well, in the visual journals, and that's cellulose. And I do not I don't love Strathmore cellulose watercolor paper like one little bit. But other than their mixed media watercolor, I mean, I use Strathmore sketchbooks when I can't get the Blick sketchbooks. And I love Strathmore's Bristol, and I will use their cheap Bristol. I'll use their expensive Bristol. Like, I don't care. I like their Bristol. But I've never been big on their watercolor paper. Especially, I know they have cotton rag available in like big sheets, but that's just so much extra work for me to like try and cut it down. And I know now they have their pre-cut illustration board and their pre-cut hot press watercolor paper, and I have some, and I've had it for 5 years, and I just haven't gotten around to trying it out yet. And Calvin said, I just can't get into digital painting. It doesn't feel as good as pencil and paper. See, that's how I feel too. I do a lot of I'll do my thumbnails traditionally, and then I'll sketch it digitally, but that's really because of the infinite revisions, and I can resize the heads, and like, it's because it allows me to like, it makes the art and drawing part easier. But then I print it out and I color it traditionally because that's what I like doing. It's not for me, like looking at these colors and watching them granulate and seeing how they reflect the light. Like, there's something exciting about that I just don't feel. I don't get that when I'm doing digital work, or it's much harder for me to get that with digital work. And there's some good dupes, like there's some good digital watercolor, but I always kind of rankle when people who do digital watercolor refer to it as just watercolor, because it's like, it's still art and it's still good, but it's not watercolor. Because with watercolor, there are limitations you have to deal with that if you're doing it digitally, you don't have those limitations. So it's just a different medium, and that's okay. Oh, and Jill said, I think the Van Gogh paints are nice enough that I've got some of their colors in pre-mixed palettes with my other professional brands. That's cool. How do I word this? I am always excited when people have different art supply experiences from me, because it just validates the idea that there's an art supply for everyone. And just because I don't like something doesn't mean it's not necessarily good. There are some things that are just not good, but it doesn't mean it's not necessarily good, or it doesn't necessarily work for other artists. It means that it didn't work for me. And there's stuff that I love that other artists are like, why do you use that? And it's like, because I like it. Kima said, I think the trade-off there is the fact that it's so accessible to do. It means it's very hard to be noticed or stand out among floods of other digital artists. It's very hard to be noticed as a traditional artist as well. So, I mean, I feel I would like, I think I said this last week, I would love to have like a what is the future for artists regarding social media and the internet roundtable, because I think a lot of us are hurting right now, or very close to being in a not good situation. You know, like if you're an artist and you're not hurting, you're either very fortunate or you're one step away from being hurting, one algorithm change away from being hurting. Like I keep talking about my Twitter, but like it used to be my best platform. I used to have really nice conversations with people on Twitter, and I know to an extent that's changed due to the political climate here in the US, and like a lot of people are dealing with a lot of stress. I understand all that, but a lot of it is also changing because people's tastes are changing on Twitter, and because people's work is being hidden. And I have no idea if I just said something that was really abhorrent that I don't know. Like I don't have any spicy takes that I'm aware of, but sometimes with Twitter, you don't know until you're goofed. I don't know if I said or did something that like unintentionally was awful. I don't know if people on Twitter just aren't jiving with my work. They're not into my work. It's not their jam. I don't know if people are just not seeing it, you know? So I definitely, and that was my strongest social media platform. That was one I thought I understood how to do it and how to like engage, how to talk to people and how to get along on there. And I guess I don't. So it's interesting times and scary times. Oh, Jennifer said, correction, the 500 series. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I was over here like, I know some of the 400 is cotton, but a lot of it is cellulose too. They don't necessarily, or at least where I live, I'm not seeing a lot of the 500 series in sketchbooks, and definitely not wire sketch. So my jam is wire-bound sketchbooks because I like being able to just like flip it all the way over and not have like a spread. But I know they offer some stuff in their hardbound sketchbooks that they don't offer in their wire-bound. So that could also just be, they have like a great paper that's just not available in the format that I prefer. Joseph said, that may be true, but don't forget that you have a lot of skills that they don't, so don't write yourself off. Yep, I agree with him. And your work has been just so good lately, Hema. You got me shook. You got me scared. I need to be, obviously the break was good for you. Like I need to take a break because maybe I'll level up. That's the hope. Tali, oh wait, Hema said, for me some things I find easier to sketch traditionally, but then more complex things are easier to draw digitally. It really depends on the subject and my mood. Yep, I get ya. I'm gonna run out of space, but that's okay. Tali said, oh no, I understand. It's just for the work I want to create. I'm looking for good, not expensive paint to do underpainting and can accept other mediums on top like charcoal, pencils, and acrylics. Okay, if you want that, then I would recommend that you get the Derwent Inktense, and it could be any format. They have the sticks, might be the cheapest way to do that because they're like crayons and you could literally just paint off of those. They also have the half pans. It's the same thing as in the sticks. And the reason I'm recommending that is because that has, I'll show you in a minute. I'll cheat. I'll add one more and do it on a cellulose paper. But it's India ink based, so it's going to be indelible once it's dry. So theoretically, you can do whatever you want on top of it, and it would lend itself well to underpainting. And the Derwent is kind of in the middle. It's not super cheap, but it's not as expensive as like Winsor & Newton or Sennelier. So it might be just what you're looking for. Calvin said, mixing real paint is also easier than trying to pick a color from an infinite color wheel. That's true. Sometimes having those limitations are actually inspiring and freeing because it narrows the possibilities into something manageable, something you can actually do. And I want to show you guys this nasty swamp water. So that's them optical brighteners for you. But we do get a lot of bright color. Now, this palette is kind of weak when it comes to the earth tones. It just is. Let me see. Hema said, sometimes also traditional mediums just have more organic feel, which is a nice effect. That's what I really like about traditional mediums. I want that like gritty, granular feel sometimes. Not on the faces, but like on clothing, on the background if I'm painting trees. Hema said, I really like the way traditional inks look in manga and stuff. I like being able to almost hear the scritchy scratch of the pen looking at like Naruto or Otoyo Monogatari. You need to be watching Monben. I always worry about what completely innocuous things might be taken the wrong way. I have such bad anxiety over that now. That's why I quit doing the vlogs. It's why my psychologist was literally like, social media is giving you worse anxiety because I am so worried that if I'm myself, I will accidentally say something the wrong way. And instead of somebody being cool and being like, hey, Becca, did you mean it like this? They'll just disown me, you know? It really does ramp the anxiety. And Jennifer said, I love wire-bound sketchbooks too. Shame they tend to be on the low quality. Yes! Yes, give me a wire-bound watercolor sketchbook with perforated pages and good paper, so I have options. And Jill said, a note of caution about the ink tints, you do have to be really careful to dissolve all the pigment completely before it's in, ooh, that's a good, yeah. Okay, dissolve all the pigment completely before it's indelible. So that would mean if there's like chunks that didn't get dissolved, when you paint on top of it, they would reactivate and pollute your color. Oh, that's an excellent point. But on that note, I'm gonna switch out my water, move this, grab my ink tent, and grab some cellulose paper, and we'll wrap up our evening. And also use the bathroom. So 5-minute break, go get some water, go hit the bathroom, stretch, get a snack. I'm gonna get some beignets after this. So this is Canson XL watercolor paper in a wire-bound sketchbook. Does it have the perforated pages? It does not. I got this at Michael's. How is it? No, it does. Why does this one not have, did they goof? I don't know. Whatever. It's, yeah, I can see them on the back, but not on the front. I don't know. This is a cellulose paper. So typically with watercolors, cellulose just sits on the surface of the paper. So sometimes I like that. Sometimes I don't. I wish Canson Montval sketchbooks were more common in the US because I do prefer Montval over XL. But XL's so cheap that it makes for a good sketchbook, like a good beat 'em up, take it with you on vacation, take it with you to school sketchbook, you know? It'll also take alcohol markers, so you can use it as a mixed media. That's the thing about cellulose watercolor sketchbooks is they're pretty good for just mixed media. You know what I mean? You can use markers in them. You can use watercolor to an extent. You can use inks in them. They have enough texture that you can use color pencils in them. So they make for good mixed media sketchbooks. Okay, so these are the graphitins. I don't know if I'm going to get to the graphitins today. These are the ink tents with an ink tent stick, because when this set came out, now they have like an additional 12 colors and they sell the 24 color set, which is just like double long. It's a little weird. I would have thought they'd have gone double wide, which is like more in keeping with a watercolor, like a normal, I say normal, with your average watercolor palette. So I pre-activate all my watercolors. So I'll just do that with these. They use India ink. What I don't like about them is they tend to be kind of opaque. They also all have like kind of a uniform granulation, which makes them kind of boring to paint with. I I've seen people do beautiful things with them. I cannot. So, you know, that's one of those, like, this one just isn't so great for me kind of art supplies. Sorry. So I'm going to, because I'm going to use this as kind of a pre-test, because I'm still sort of kind of picking at the Graphitin field test, and I wanted to see how well they handle with the Derwent Inktense underneath them. Twitter has definitely gotten a lot more difficult to navigate than it used to be. No one ever, like, or very rarely does anybody just like yell at me or like tell me I'm a terrible person or anything really extreme like that. It's just, I feel like I'm a kid in the punishment corner and I'm being ignored, like I'm in timeout, which I know is kind of a childish response, but you know, I post stuff and it doesn't get any kind of a response. And then I see other people whose art is very similar to mine, whether it's thematically or style-wise, and they do better than I do. And it's just rough, you know? I'm trying to work on that, but a lot of my work opportunities in the past have come from the internet. So it's a hard reliance to break, because I use social media to build up an audience of people who might enjoy my work. And if I'm not doing well on any of those platforms, and I don't know exactly why I'm not doing well on those platforms, so I can't necessarily change, or if like on YouTube, for example, quote unquote art commentary channels where it's people making art and then talking about other artists negatively. Like, I have a moral objection to that, frankly. Like, I have a problem with that. It really bothers me. And I've said many times, like, I'll talk about companies, but I'm not going to talk about other artists. So, like, that is something that would definitely make my channel more popular, but I'm not going to do it because I have an ethical objection with the practice. And then there's the fear that even just saying that, which is a very lukewarm way of saying, like, not into it, not for me, could be opening me up to somebody trying to start stuff with me. Calvin said people need to be reminded of the I'm rubber and your glue talk. Yeah, I think a lot of what's going on regarding Twitter, for sure, there's a lot of stuff. People having access to celebrities and the people they admire, like way too much access to those people, and parasocial relationships. But also, I think people having a bad day sometimes get on social media and they take their bad day out on somebody else, you know, instead of, like, even if it's somebody who you followed for a long time and you like their stuff in general and you respect them, if they're having a bad day and they post something that's not the best idea to post, and, you know, like a mediocre hot take, and you then respond to that and take your bad day out on them, it can turn something that didn't really need to be a fight into like a blood war. So my big thing with Inktense is everything just seems to have the same amount of granulation, which just, for me, makes it a little bit boring. And I understand why everything has the same amount of granulation. It's because it's using India ink, and I guess everything is milled to the same amount. So like with ultramarine, you don't really get a lot of granulation, and you would expect granulation. And you also get a lot of coverage. Like everything is kind of opaque. And I don't think they've added anything to make these colors brighter. I think it's just India ink is more opaque. And Derwent promises translucent color, but they're not really translucent. You can mix colors, you can glaze colors. They're not bad. They're just, and actually I'm kind of liking them on this cellulose paper better than I liked them on the cotton rag paper I initially swatched them on, because I am actually getting some granulation with this. Hema said, like, you kind of wonder if there's something going on about you in whispers. And Calvin said, oh, those T channel, aka drama channels. Yeah, I'm not into that life. Like, if people, I understand why people enjoy watching that. Like, I grew up with my mom watching soap operas. It's very similar. Tabloids still sell, even though the newspaper is basically dead. You know, I get why people like it. I mean, humans like gossip because it means you're part of the in crowd. Like, as animals, that's part of social grooming, and being part of a group and feeling like you belong is hearing all the gossip, and it makes you feel like you're empowered and like you're in the know. I don't know. A lot of it could like really ruin people's lives, and sometimes it just boils down to like, I'm mad at you this week, and sometimes it boils down to, I need content and you're my content. And I don't know, it just kind of makes me very uncomfortable, because it's just not necessarily what being an artist is all about, and it's definitely not what I think being an artist online should be about. We have a platform where we can educate and help other people, and where we can make art more accessible, and we can kind of lower some. Ooh, with this old Inktense stick, I am getting some interesting granulation that I'm not getting necessarily from the Derwents. It's also kind of scrubby and patchy and grungy looking, but, you know, also kind of interesting. But yeah, what Hema said about the whisper channels, that's what it is. And I was bullied a lot growing up by other girls. And maybe TMI, I had this one friend that I had been friends with for like 8 years. Like I went on her family vacations with her. She was always spending the night at my house. Like, I thought of her like my sister. And then I found out from another girl that she was spreading rumors, like, that I was like pregnant and stealing other girls' boyfriends, and just like these really terrible things that weren't true. And that she'd been saying that about me for years behind my back. And yeah, just like that. Like, I didn't, honestly, there were other girls who talked smack about me and I didn't really care, or I thought it was kind of funny. But when I found out that this person who I thought of as a sister was doing that to me, it really hurt. Like, I totally cut her out of my life, and I cut our shared friend out of our life, because the shared friend never even asked like why I wasn't friends with the other girl. She just picked the other girl. So I was just like, okay, I'm not gonna fight it, because maybe you knew she was saying these things about me. So like, whisper network stuff really freaks me out, because it's not really about even telling the truth about somebody. It's about finding something juicy that other people are interested in and using that for your own social benefit, whether it's true or not. And that's what kind of really bugs me. Like, you're not actually doing it to warn somebody of like a potential predator or a bad actor or someone who's out to hurt you. You're doing it for social gain at somebody else's expense. And that's not really my jam. Like, I would rather social climb by like making stuff that other people found helpful, you know, like that's the person I would rather be. That doesn't mean I haven't like rolled around in the dust when I was a teenager, but, you know, I'm an adult and I try to be a good person and not do stuff like that, and not engage or participate in stuff like that. Calvin said T channels are entertaining, but after all, it just feels like the same topic over and over. Like, I'm mad at this person and that person is mad at me. Yeah, That's about it. Yeah, that's it. I'm salty. That was my character. My OC, do not steal. Joseph said, everyone knows that being an artist is about working yourself to the bone and then posting about that on 5 social networks. Yes, for 4 people to hit like on it. That's what being an artist is about. You got it. And Hema said that's extra messed up. And Jill said that hurts so much. I'm sorry that happened to you. Yeah. 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 I had something kind of similar happen as an adult, and it didn't hurt as bad because I kind of figured that person might do, because I'd already gone through it and we weren't that close, and I kind of figured that person might do that kind of thing. So when it happened, I was just like, oh, okay. I wasn't surprised. But yeah, those T channels remind me of that, and it makes me very anxious. Like, I am bringing this up not to talk about what happened in that instance, because I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know any of the people. This is not a judgment call. I'm bringing this up to talk about how the commentary, like how popular people making commentary about this person, how that made me feel. So this isn't like a judgment call. I'm not like defending them or anything, but like all the creep show art videos that are coming out, and it seems like a lot of them are people who did deal with that person and have had experiences with them and they don't like them. But there's also just like a lot of people rehashing stuff that was said on those channels and making money off of that. And it's like, you don't even know them. You have never dealt with any of these people in real life. This is just money for you. Like, it's like paparazzi tabloids for the art community. And it's so weird because there's some like, I mean, we're all complicated and problematic to an extent, you know, like I have depression problems, and I can definitely get on people's nerves for sure. Like I'm not pretending I'm perfect by any shakes. But like we all have like our battle damage, you know? We all have like our bad days. We all have like our low days. We all have our days where we might have responded to somebody a little more snippy than we normally would. So I don't know. It just like, it makes me really uncomfortable because like art channels on YouTube, like when you make just art and you're not doing commentary, you make so much less money than everybody else. Like your channel's so much less popular than literally almost any other kind of YouTube. So to see people attacking each other for clout and for money, it's like fighting over a bowl of goldfish crackers. Like it's just so sad for me. So I'm gonna let this dry, and then I'm gonna put the Derwent Graphitant on top of it. I'm still trying to get them beignets. I still want them beignets. And that's actually like the Creepshow art thing with everybody like jumping on the bandwagon to make statements about it. That's like made me really uncomfortable, and I've been like kind of quiet about it because I'm also kind of worried that by even just saying like this phenomena makes me uncomfortable, that I'm opening myself up to be not necessarily for good faith critique, but I'm opening myself up as like, oh, Becca wants to be bait this week. Okay, let me get caught up. So, Hema said the way that always happens in Twitter, Pokemon RP. Thanks. Yeah, I don't know. People need to work through that somewhere, I guess. And Jill said, similar happened to me too. I feel ya. It's rough. And Jennifer said, I hate people that are, I hate that people are memeing that situation. Yeah. All I can like I do not know any of the people involved personally, but all I can think about is how awful I would feel all the time if that was me. Calvin said the Creepshow art drama, everyone just recycling the same talking point. It's like a broken record. It's just to keep it going. And like, if I genuinely felt like that was a situation, like I am all for when you do messed up stuff being held accountable, but I'm also all for being given the room to like step away for a while and grow and learn and change and try to become a better person. And I don't feel like there's room to do that when people are making money off of keeping it alive by talking about like the same old stuff. And I'm partially doing this test for myself because, like I said, I want to finish the Graphitin field test. And I know some people like them a lot. I'm struggling with them, so I want to figure out a way to use them that I like. And Hema said, making copy pastas and then everyone would get in on it, even people with nothing to do in the situation or the folks involved. Yeah, that like I don't like dogpiling. And Jennifer said, I don't trust most commentary channels anyway. I find the art one or worse. I don't know. I don't watch a lot of commentary. I used to watch D'Angelo Wallace sometimes. It kind of depends. I am kind of interested in beauty community tea, but only as like a complete outsider who does not do anything beauty related whatsoever. But I'm more interested in like I've been watching. Oh, shoot. Like Pride and Prejudice YouTube channels where they talk about Pride and Prejudice and Jane Austen. I've been watching that a lot. So I just and what I'm doing here is I just want to see, because when I was trying this with regular watercolor, I noticed it dulled the color a lot. So I want to see if it's going to dull the color, because the colors are so vibrant and intense. I think doing either let me actually put some of this down so I can later try doing the ink tints on top of that. But I think I might have found a solution to the field test is what I'm saying. Yeah, I mean the thing about art on the internet, especially like cartoony, illustration-y art, if you live in a place that doesn't have much of an industry for that, it can be so exhausting and demoralizing and competitive and dog eat dog to an extent. So, you know, I could see the appeal of like, okay, this isn't working for me. I'm having a bad day. And like, I don't know, somebody like tweeting something snarky, okay? I cannot see spending 6 hours making a video to do that on the same line, like, but people do. But it's like it can be such a grind of a life and of a field, and it does require a lot of sacrifice and dedication. And I mean, for me, when I feel depressed over this, I'm not sitting here hating anyone else. I don't hate or blame any other artist. I don't look at my life and think, oh, if so-and-so didn't exist, it would be so much better. It's all self-directed. All of my feelings are about myself. So like, even when I have like beef with another artist, you know, I just don't, I couldn't see myself like wanting to publicly get on. I mean, unless it was somebody who like sexually harassed me or did worse to me, then I might publicly talk about it because it might protect somebody else. But like, I just can't see like airing a personal beef on the internet at the age I'm at now, you know. I couldn't tell. I'm so glad YouTube wasn't so much a thing when I was in high school, because who knows, I probably would have posted some like really cringy cosplay videos. Yeah, that's definitely would have been like a lot of what I posted. But you know, I'm glad that temptation wasn't there for me, because I can respond with the hindsight of like somebody who's not dealing with high school drama. So it looks like I can layer the Graphitin on top of the ink tints without any problem. I can do glazing and it'll still have like this nice color intensity under it, which I like. It seems to play decently well on cellulose paper, which is good, because sometimes it's all about finding like that magic combination of the things that get along well together. And you might think you hate something, and then you find that combination and you're like, no, I love it. And this is probably the spiciest thing I'm gonna say. It also makes me kind of sad that those commentary channels are more popular than like tutorial art channels. I understand why. I mean, just on a, like, look, I make tutorial art, so I know it's not always the most entertaining thing to listen to, you know? But it just kind of bums me out, because like that's not the art I want. That's not the face of the art community that I want non-artists to think of when they think of making art and art YouTube. And that's not how most professionals treat each other by a long shake. I mean, the other thing is that kind of stuff normalizes it, you know, normalizes going and snarking about the people you work with and spilling the tea and all that about people you work with, and rewards people for that. And that, like, it's very hard to work in a group environment when you cannot trust the people you work with, and where any little thing you say could be taken out of context and used to hurt you. And I know there's a lot of work environments that are like that, and those are typically hostile work environments. So it just, you know, it's not my favorite. Becca and her spicy tanks. It is like a big game of telephone. That's something else that kind of bothers me. And Jennifer said, I watch too much YouTube and YouTube drama. I feel that. I usually, when I'm recording a tutorial and I don't have to do voice stuff, I'm usually listening to something on YouTube. And Calvin said, the only drama that I like is speedrunner cheating drama. I love speedrunner cheating drama. And I also love over-promise Kickstarter drama. Stop Drop Retro talks about like Kickstarter campaigns that are just like, they're promising something they cannot deliver, and I'm here for that. That I'm here for, because you're not hurting individuals. I mean, with the speedrunner drama, quite frankly, if they just disappeared for like half a year, it would probably all blow over. With the Kickstarter drama, you're not going after individuals, you're going after companies, and they change their names in between every Kickstarter anyway, so it's not like you can hold them accountable. So to me, you know, it's more teaching people like these types of Kickstarters, like all the robot Kickstarters, these types of Kickstarters typically don't deliver. So to me, that's more like consumer protection. Oh, I guess this one hadn't fully dried, because it did not want to let me layer it. Are any of them? No, none of them are fully dry. That's okay. This is the blue over the pink's kind of pretty. I think I'll call this a success. I mean, I think I figured out how I'm going to do that field test. I think I figured out which combination is going to work for me, and I appreciate that. So I would call this a success, even though I made a mess success. And yeah. So hopefully this is helpful for Tali when she can watch the replay. And hopefully this was helpful for you guys and fun for you guys, even though I totally went off into a tangent talking about art commentary channels. The Earth 2 drama. Ooh, I'm gonna look that up. That's right, my watercolor maker, it just paints. It's like a 3D printer that just paints. Oh no, you know someone's gonna invent that. All right, I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. I really enjoyed hanging out with y'all tonight. I'm gonna go get me some delicious, soft, pillowy, fried dough balls. I'm gonna go get some beignets. And I hope you guys have a good weekend and a good rest of your week. So, bye guys! Thank